I never imagined that clearing out the basement would lead me to uncover pieces of myself I had long forgotten. It was an overcast morning, and after staring at the disorganized chaos for years, I decided to muster up the courage to finally tackle the mess. My late husband, Michael, had always called the basement my memory vault. But for the 12 years since his passing, I'd barely set foot down there. The thought of going through the remnants of my past felt like a mountain I wasn't ready to climb. At 64, I often found myself reflecting on the person I used to be. The years had brought wisdom, yes, but also a quiet longing I couldn't quite place. As I descended the creaky wooden stairs into the basement that morning, the familiar musty scent of old boxes and aged wood greeted me. The light bulb above flickered as if uncertain about illuminating this hidden corner of my life. The first box I opened was filled with old photo albums, their edges worn and yellowed. I dusted off the cover of one and flipped it open, the faint smell of aged paper filling the air. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a photograph of myself in my early 20s. There I was at a beach party, laughing with a margarita in hand, wearing a bright red sundress that danced in the breeze. I looked so carefree, so alive. Margaret, the vibrant and youthful woman staring back at me, felt like a stranger. As I traced the photo with my fingers, memories of a time when life felt boundless came rushing back. Those were the days when I believed anything was possible. But life, with its twists and turns, had a way of taming that spirit. Michael, bless his soul, had been steady and dependable, but he wasn't the kind of man who encouraged spontaneity or excitement. And over the years, I'd let that part of me fade away. Lost in thought, I almost didn't hear the sound of footsteps on the basement stairs. Startled, I turned to see Ethan, my step-grandson, standing there with a coffee cup in hand and a sheepish grin on his face. "Surprise," he said, lifting the cup in a mock toast. "Ethan, when did you get here?" I asked, caught off guard, but genuinely happy to see him. "Just now. Saw your car outside and figured I'd stop by." "Looks like you could use some help," he said, nodding toward the open box in front of me. I hadn't seen Ethan in 4 years. He was 27 now, and the boy I remembered had grown into a broad-shouldered man with a confident yet easygoing demeanour. He always had this way of brightening a room without trying, and today was no exception. "I was just going through some old things," I said, holding up the photo album. "What's this?" Ethan asked, curiosity lighting up his face as he reached for the album. Before I could pull it away, he flipped it open to the photo of me at the beach party. His eyes widened as he looked at the picture, then at me. "Wait, is this you?" he asked, incredulous. I laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Yes, that's me, back in my wild years." "Wild years?" he teased, his grin widening. "I had no idea you were such a party girl, Margaret." His words made me laugh, but they also stirred something deeper, something I hadn't felt in years. There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine admiration. "Life was different back then," I said, smiling softly. Ethan nodded, still staring at the photo. "You look amazing. It's strange to think of you like this, but in a good way." There was something in his eyes, sir, mix of curiosity and respect, that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in years. We spent the next hour flipping through the album, laughing at the silly hairstyles and outdated fashion. Ethan's fascination with my younger self was both amusing and touching. This one's my favourite, he said, pointing to a picture of me in a red dress, dancing with friends at a college party. You look so happy, so full of life. I was, I admitted, my voice tinged with nostalgia. But life has a way of changing things. Responsibilities, routines, you forget how to let loose. Ethan looked at me thoughtfully. Maybe it's not too late to remember. His words hung in the air, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, hope, perhaps, or the beginnings of a new chapter I hadn't considered. By the time we closed the album, the basement no longer felt like a daunting task, but rather a treasure trove of memories waiting to be rediscovered. "Why don't we take a break?" Ethan suggested, standing up and stretching. "I'll grab us some coffee." I nodded, watching him head upstairs. As I sat there alone, holding the album in my lap, I felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude for the memories, regret for the years I'd let slip by, and a quiet determination to rediscover the woman in those photos. When Ethan returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, he handed me one and smiled. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his mug. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my mug against his. That moment, simple as it was, felt like the start of something. I didn't know where this journey of self-discovery would take me, but for the first time in years, I was ready to find out. The days following that morning in the basement felt like a blur of memories and self-reflection. Ethan's visit had stirred something deep inside me, something I couldn't ignore. He had planted a seed of possibility, and it was starting to grow. After years of living in a routine, I suddenly found myself curious about the things I'd set aside. Old passions, forgotten dreams, and long-lost friends began creeping back into my mind. It was as if opening those boxes had unlocked a part of me that had been sealed away for too long. Ethan called the next day, his voice full of excitement. "Hey, Margaret, I was thinking, would you want to go for a drive? There's this spot I've been meaning to show you." I hesitated. "A drive? Where to?" "It's a surprise," he said, laughing. "Trust me, you'll love it." Something in his voice made me say yes. It wasn't like I had a packed schedule, and the idea of an adventure, even a small one, was too tempting to resist. When Ethan pulled into my driveway that afternoon, I noticed he'd brought along a backpack and a small cooler. "What's all this?" I asked as I climbed into his car. "Just some essentials," he said with a wink. The drive was scenic, with rolling hills and open fields stretching out on either side of the winding road. Ethan played a playlist of old and new songs, a mix of his favourites and classics that I recognised from my younger days. After about an hour, he turned onto a narrow dirt road that led to a clearing by a lake. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees surrounding the area. It was breathtaking. "Wow!" I said, stepping out of the car. "This is beautiful." "I thought you'd like it," Ethan said, pulling out a blanket from his backpack and spreading it on the grass. "This spot has always been my go-to place when I need to think or clear my head." We sat by the water, the calmness of the lake reflecting the stillness inside me. Ethan pulled out sandwiches and iced tea from the cooler, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. "So," he said, breaking the quiet, "what's next for you?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Well, you've been talking about rediscovering yourself and all that. What's the plan? Or is there a plan?" I laughed softly. "Ethan, I'm 64 years old. I don't think I need a grand plan at this stage." "Who says?" he replied, leaning back on his elbows. It's never too late to try something new or revisit something you love. I thought about his words. Was there something I'd left behind that I still wanted to pursue? Do you remember that picture from the album? I asked him. The one of me in the red dress at the beach party? Of course, he said. You looked like you were having the time of your life. I was, I admitted. And you know what I loved most about those days? Dancing. Dancing? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I said, smiling at the memory. I used to love dancing. There was something so freeing about it, like nothing else in the world mattered. Ethan's face lit up. Then, you should do it again? I laughed. Oh, Ethan, I don't think there are many dance clubs catering to retirees. Who says you need a club? There are community classes, events, even online tutorials. You could start anywhere. The idea seemed absurd, but the more I thought about it, the more it intrigued me. Maybe I will, I said, surprising myself. Ethan grinned. That's the spirit. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about other things I'd enjoyed in my youth and how I might bring some of them back into my life. By the time we packed up and headed back, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I turned on music in my living room. Soft jazz filled the space as I hesitantly swayed to the rhythm. My movements were awkward at first, but as I let the music guide me, I started to feel more at ease. The next day, I signed up for a beginner's dance class at the local community centre. Walking into the studio was intimidating at first, but the instructor, a lively woman named Elena, welcomed me warmly. The class was filled with people of all ages, and the atmosphere was light-hearted and fun. As I moved through the steps, I felt a familiar spark reignite within me. It wasn't about perfection or performance, was about joy. Ethan stopped by a few days later to check in. How's the dancing going? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Better than I expected, I said, beaming. I even made a couple of new friends in the class. Look at you, social butterfly, he teased. I laughed, but his words reminded me of how much my world had opened up in such a short time. Over the following weeks, I started to feel more like the woman in those old photos. Not because I was trying to recapture my youth, but because I was reconnecting with the parts of myself I had buried over the years. One evening, after class, Elena approached me. Margaret, you have such a natural rhythm, she said. Have you ever thought about performing? Performing? I echoed, stunned. There's a small showcase coming up, she explained. It's nothing big, just a fun way for our class to show what we've learned. You'd be perfect. The thought terrified me, but a part of me was intrigued. I'll think about it, I said, and Elena smiled, knowingly. When I told Ethan about the showcase, he was ecstatic. You have to do it, he said. I'll even come to cheer you on. As the days passed, I found myself practicing more and more, not just for the showcase, but for the sheer joy of it. Dancing had become my escape, my way of expressing myself in ways words couldn't. The night of the showcase arrived, and as I stood backstage, nerves threatened to overwhelm me. But then I thought of Ethan's encouragement and the woman in the red dress, and I took a deep breath. When the music started, I let it guide me. The audience faded away, and for those few minutes, I felt completely alive. Afterward, as I stepped off the stage, Ethan was waiting with a bouquet of flowers and a proud grin. You were amazing, he said, pulling me into a hug. Thank you, I whispered, tears of gratitude welling up. In that moment, I realised that life wasn't about clinging to the past, but about embracing who we are, no flaws, fears, and all. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.